Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Prabhu. Again, my name is Casey O'Donnell. I'm one of the conference co-chairs, associate professor here at MSU. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. I know it's a little bit of a marathon by the end, but I'm super excited to introduce our final keynote speaker and closing out the conference. So I'm not sure if anybody has noticed, but
keep going.
Okay. If anybody's noticed, but this is actually the first time we've ever had a keynote speaker from MSU. And I'm actually really delighted that that's the case, but I'll give you some insight into that, which is actually that we asked Beth to be a keynote speaker before we hired her. We wanted her, and so when you have the opportunity to hire somebody that you like enough that you want to be a keynote speaker, you jump on that opportunity. Beth joined us just this fall, and we've been really delighted to have her. Let's see. Beth, like myself, is kind of a hybrid researcher, game designer, which comes with its own set of baggage and things. Prabhu said we're cool. I mostly feel awkward, but more than a hybrid researcher, game designer, she really is an artist in ways that I really find inspiring. And I think many of you will too. I think you'll really enjoy the opportunity to listen to her talk about her work. From games to comics to transmedia, Beth really exemplifies many of the things that we look for. And really is a leading scholar in the emerging field of Indigenous games. And I think it's super important that we have her here, and excited to hear her talk to you guys. She's an award-winning game maker, and I'm really just delighted to have her part of our community, but also to talk to you today. Elizabeth, LaPensée, please.
Oh, perfect. All right. Hit the button that's for you. Now I have power. Anin. That is a way of saying hello. There's actually no way of saying hello in my language, nor is there a way of saying goodbye. We say bamapi, which means until another time or until another moment, until I see you again. So Anin, my name is Elizabeth LaPensée. Ubananong Indigenous cause, minwa, Yakekindota, minwa, Quezon, Dujwa. Part of what I'm saying there is that I'm from Quezon. So the land we're standing on right now was traditionally called the Quezon, or where the rivers meet. And it's a part of the Three Fires Confederacy, Odawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. And so the opportunity to stand here and give this keynote in this way, knowing that I am now living here, is immensely meaningful to me because I am Anishinaabe and Métis and Irish, and this is traditionally Anishinaabe territory. So thank you all for being here, for staying through to this opportunity, and for just being here in this land and with me. And just to say miigwech, thank you to the people of this land, of this territory. So the thing about me is the meaning is in the meaning you make. So whatever you take away from this, I hope is relevant to you in your work. And I'm pretty much just going to give like the actual 45-minute version of the talk. I'll have 3 minutes to fit into at the Game Developers Conference. So this is delightful for me. I actually get to elaborate a little bit here. So where am I coming from? All right, so as I mentioned, I'm Anishinaabe, which is the Great Lakes territories here. This is the traditional territory of Anishinaabe. And I'm also Métis, and I'm Irish, and I'm a designer, writer, artist, and scholar living on Turtle Island. So Turtle Island is the Americas. That's our understanding and teachings of it. And as I go along through game design, what appealed to me so much about it was this ability to express the ways of knowing that have been passed on to me from my mother, from my aunties, from my family, from elders and storytellers, through this amazing form of expression. So on the right there, you'll see that's a menu interface for Linguistics, which is a singing game for passing on language to any player. Could be any player in this case. And so in this menu, you navigate through, and little highlights will pop up of different communities. And when you do that rollover, then you'll hear drumming and you'll hear singing in the language of that community, and then you get to access that and learn the songs. So what I do in my work is I say, okay, the teachings say that we are on Turtle Island. If you look at it geographically, it really actually does look like a turtle, but it's not so explicit until it's actually visually represented. Fun fact, John Romero is Yaqui and Cherokee. He is an indigenous game developer. What he was doing in his work was expanding our ways of perceiving in games from two-dimensional space to three-dimensional space, and was foundational to the making of a first-person shooter, right? So how many of you guys have played Doom? How many of you started off by like modding Doom or working in Doom that way, creating? Some of you, yeah. In a lot of ways, it's been a foundational contribution to games. What John Romero was doing in his work through code was expanding space. A lot of what I'm doing is going back to 2D to represent indigenous ways of knowing, partly because of the limitations that I've experienced. Because when I was working on Survive It, it's a social impact game, it's on the web, and you take on non-linear quests that happen in the real world. A lot of this was done when I was like living out in the bush, in places where, like, if I'm going to use my cell phone, it's like you got to go to that one corner of that one window somewhere, and you kind of catch it for like a few seconds, and then it dies, you know? No Skype, no Google Video, no streaming video, nothing like that. And so very often when I've been working on games, I have to be like, okay, if I'm working with a team, I'll work on it for a while, drive 20 minutes down to town, hang out outside of the library where they got open Wi-Fi that's just enough in one corner to catch it just long enough to get the uploads I need to my team, and then head back up to the hills. Which, in part, led to the making of Invaders. So Invaders, which, by the way, somebody asked me if the shirts were going to be here from this game, and they're not. They're all sold out, so I'm sorry about that. But there are plans for there to be another distribution cycle of the shirt for this. So at the time I made Invaders, I did design and programming for this one. There's a backstory I'm going to tell you. Because you guys can go play the game. I can tell you a little bit about the game, but I think really what I'm here to do is tell you why I do the things I do. So Invaders came out of, I was living out in the bush again, and there was a wildfire. And I lost everything, just about. Not the car, which was good, so I was able to get out, right? And I had one pen, which was just enough to draw the inspirational concept art for another game I'm going to tell you about later. Just enough ink there to draw that one drawing. And then I had nothing. I had no art supplies. I was moving motel to motel. They hadn't placed us anywhere else yet. And I need to create. I don't know about you all, but myself, like, I need to create in order to function and not be healthy otherwise. And I had really nothing, and other than Steven Paul Judd had made, this is a new piece, but he had made a black and white photo of warriors facing off with the Space Invaders. And I thought, that should actually be playable, right? And really what happened was I had a backpack in my car that had shirts that I like to change into shirt dresses and stuff. I'll like modify clothes a lot. And those were the only clothes I had left, were like all these shirts that I had intended to sometime work on, but hadn't got around to. And so as I was pulling out these shirts, I found this shirt from Steven Paul Judd, and it was the Invaders one. And I was like, I'm gonna just do this. I'm gonna go to Steven Paul Judd and ask him if I can turn this into a game. And so he sent me the art files right away, and that's what I did for a few months over the summer, was working on this game. So it's a play, of course, on the classic game Space Invaders. How many of you guys have played Space Invaders? Yeah. Now, there are a couple things that are different about it. Obviously, it's in black and white, and I've been asked why I did that. That's because it is based on a photo. It's the idea of a black and white photo. Also, for me, it is talking about the process of invasion through gameplay, right? Laughter is medicine. That's one of the teachings in my community and communities. So this was a way to talk about genocide that happened as a part of the invasion of settlers that came in and took land and displaced indigenous communities in a way that could be fun, could be faced off with directly. Because as we all know, in Space Invaders, what eventually happens? You die. You lose. You do lose, and the high score really is just how far can I get until I have died or until I have lost. So one of the things I did with this was the three warriors, there are four of them. One is the player, and there are three beneath, and very often I get this response to the game. Somebody's playing and they're like, what is up with the warriors that are down at the bottom of the screen? They're not helping me. They're expecting that some kind of power-up function will happen and that those warriors are then going to shoot arrows too. There's going to be some kind of backup help that's happening. But in fact, the first time you get hit, one of them disappears. They actually represent your lives. So instead of representing lives by points or by hearts, they are represented by photos of real people. Because these are the truths of what happened. People did die. People were lost. We do die. Now, in many other games, there are many other ways of representing Indigenous ways of knowing or teachings in very simple kinds of ways, while relating the losses. So this comes up very often. I collaborate closely with communities as well. So this was a game that I worked on for a community, the Evolved Cultural Center, in collaboration with the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. And so in this one, OMSI wanted to, this is the museum, wanted to have an interface where you're accessing traditional foods and then you're playing mini games that are gathering games. And right away the community said, yeah, but that's changed over time. And in fact, we've lost a lot of our traditional territory. So one of the first aspects of the game is, as you're interacting with the map, there's an overlay where you get to see what was a part of the traditional territories and where all of the foods were, and then it transitions to what's actually available now and where that's all moved to, because it's much, much smaller, right? So just visually we can make a statement about that that's impactful immediately. And then when you get into the mini games, the function works differently. So sometimes I like to break things. So that's kind of what I like to do that. I like to break things. Things happen, you know. So this is a suite of touchscreen mini games in a museum for youth, which what will tend to happen when youth are faced with a touchscreen game? What are they going to do?
Touch it.
They're going to touch it a lot, right? So in the salmon catching game, instead, there's a flip where it tells you at the beginning of the game, of that instance of it, how many salmon your community needs for the community feast. If you catch too many, you lose. Okay? So this is just one way in which, very quickly, very simply, you got too many salmon. You don't need to do that. Actually, we can reinforce traditional ways of knowing, and sustainability is one term I think that is more widely referenced outside of Indigenous communities as a way of understanding what can be shared, right? So I'm always passing on values through gameplay, and this isn't just in the game design itself, certainly it can be, but it's also in the process. The process is very important. So I worked on this game, The Gift of Food, as a board game. When I went to the community, the idea was they had gotten a grant to make a video game, and then I actually sat with elders and community members And they said, you know what, like, if you make a video game, we're not going to be able to play it. There are no computers in the community center, nor are they in homes, and they're not in the classroom. So we don't really know what the point of this is, other than that somebody wrote a grant because they had an idea that we needed a video game. Now, we're never actually going to be able to use it. And I was like, well, then let's not make a video game. That doesn't make any sense. So I went on a path of making a board game with them, which I prototyped board games, but I had never taken one to full like commercial quality, right? Well, at the end of creating this, we spent about, I think, a year and a half on it, which is something that is very important because the reciprocity that happens while developing with other Indigenous communities that are not my own community and can happen within my communities as well, is that it's not just about me being a part of that community and bringing their teachings into games, and then them getting a game and other people getting experiences through that game. It's about the amazing gifts that they are giving to me along the way, right? All the knowledge that I'm being gifted with. So at the end of this process, I cannot actually show you the board game. I swear it exists. I do. It's gorgeous. It's like so beautiful, and it has amazing mechanics. It's really great. You know, it's based off of, the mechanics are based off of the community values of stewardship, collaboration, generosity, and gratitude, and all of those actually come out in the gameplay. But I can't actually show you the game because at the end of that whole process, there's a council, like an advisory board called a council or an advisory board. And they determined that there were particular teachings in that game that were not safe to share outside of their communities. The reason why is totally valid. Essentially, the game teaches you what traditional foods are in those territories and optimum times to gather those foods. This could be, say, clams for a particularly contentious issue, and some others as well, right? And so you go through all these seasonal scenario cards and you experience different options and outcomes that influence one another, and you have a basket of food that you're gathering, and at times you're having potlucks where it's not just about how much you take. It's not about taking and taking and taking. It's actually about how much can you share with the wider community. And I absolutely respect that. But as a designer then, it's always been really important for me to have a path of my own work and then a path of the work that happens with communities, because I never know what might happen. And so in this case, yeah, it passed on the teaching so well that it was unsafe. The reason why it's unsafe is because there are people who will think, because they read a book, that it gives them the right to walk on land and take plants, take medicines, take foods, without understanding that all of these actions actually need to come with reciprocity with the land. This is why, in particular, I have a really hard time playing a lot of commercial games. So, like, I loved World of Warcraft in its heyday. I was a part of Terra Nova. I really enjoyed the community aspect of it. But it was really hard for me to get into taking plants and just taking them. And this idea that they're just going to regenerate. I'm just going to take. And the very fact that, down to the mechanics, you're rewarded for taking. You're given points. It's point-based, right? Your skill-based is based around taking. Whereas, say, in an Indigenous massively multiplayer game, instead you might have a scenario where you have to go talk to a quest giver who is an elder, and they're giving you knowledge about those plants, and you can't even see them. You cannot even perceive them until you've listened to the stories that they're telling you. Then you cannot even pick them until you've listened to the teachings that they're giving you. And then you cannot even use them and turn them into the medicines that you need until, again, you've gone and gained more knowledge through stories and through hands-on learning. So Underwater is the latest game that I've released. It's a singing game. So much like linguistics, but not necessarily with the purpose of teaching language. So I'm going to teach everyone a phrase from this land right now, miigwech. Okay? Miigwech means thank you, and chi miigwech means like a big thank you, or like actually really thank you, like a lot. But it really means, chi means great. So that's a great thanks, okay? So in honor water, there are phrases like this. Nibi, which means water, miigwech, the mat is a wind, which means a good way of life, the way we live, a good way of life. But the songs are very poetic, and so they're not in the proper structure that you would actually speak the language. So it's really important with this game to have the understanding that the language is much more complex than just memorizing words. And this is why it's my deepest belief that apps are not the way to learn Indigenous languages. That in fact, this technique of memorization is going to hold us back. There are really inspiring projects with learning language in games, but we don't have the capacity or the funding, and certainly I have not had the funding to make what we really need, which is a fully immersive environment. The best example of a really successful project in this is Joseph Arthur, who's in Hoopa Valley, worked with youth to modify Dragon Age. So instead of trying to come up with money to make their own really awesome game, they took a game that the youth were really already playing because they thought it was awesome, and they stripped out all English. There's nothing in there at all. All of the voiceovers were replaced, all of the text was replaced. And then they told the youth over summer, I think it was like summer classes, that their work was to play this game. So they're like, okay, sounds great. But then they went into the game and realized they actually didn't know what anyone was saying, but they were motivated by the quest structure enough to stick with it. And by the end of playing this game, really could engage in person with fluent speakers and had gotten over what tends to happen in our communities is that because of colonization and because of the residential school experience, where I don't know how much about any of this any of you know, but children were taken from their families and they were put in residential schools and they were beat for speaking their language and their hair was cut, which in many traditions when your hair is cut, you only do that when somebody has died. And there was not enough communication happening that they knew what was going on. So they're all taken, their hair is cut, they think their whole entire family has died, and they're told, don't speak your language. And they're hurt for it. And so there's a lot of sensitivity around our languages. Right now we're really fortunate here in this area, in this land, there are the most fluent speakers of my language in Michigan at all. However, we are still down to a handful. Traditionally, originally, my mother's from Bawating, which is north of here, so Sault Ste. Marie area, if anyone knows, between Ontario and the States. The last elder who spoke the sound that is unique to Bawating died 5 years ago. It's gone for me. My language, my dialect is gone. And I don't want that to happen for anyone else who is Anishinaabe. There are people, there are fluent speakers who maintain other dialects, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm really motivated to have these games that include our language, whether or not it's even necessarily that's the emphasis of the game. It's just we need to have it everywhere all the time. Well, with Honor Water, you do get some of the language, but you also get another piece of it. This is some of my art. This is available printed on metal as well. And in this game, you're learning water songs. There are 3 water songs that were passed to me by Sharon Day, who runs Nibi Walks, which are elders and other women and other community members gather and they walk around the Great Lakes and around rivers and they sing songs. And as Anishinaabe choir, as an Anishinaabe woman, I understand part of my role to be a water carrier. This is part of like our particular community's teachings. And so as water carriers, we carry with us copper, and we carry with us water, and we sing to the water, and we then give that water that has been sung to back to the water so that water will remember herself before all of the toxins, before the sounds. Because we're not just talking about pollutants like oil, we're also talking about sound pollutants. There's a lot of teachings about this to us, which is part of what makes games so immensely meaningful. Sound is vital. just as vital as anything that is visual. And so this is all infused in the kind of work that I do. So in this game, it's just a sing-along, and it's available for free on iPads. And recently, I was asked by community members if I could just take the gameplay, recordings of the gameplay, and put them online, which is what I've done. So you can access the songs from anywhere now as long as you have internet access, and I've made those gameplay footage videos fully downloadable for anyone to take them. Part of why I made this game was because water songs tend to come to me, and I was born and raised on the West Coast. So coming here to Michigan, that's part of why it's so huge to me. I visited here, but I've never had the opportunity to live here. And I've always been trying to get back here. Since childhood, I've been saying, I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to go home. And I would get teased because I'd go on these adventures, and then I'd eventually come back to Oregon, and anyone who was Anishinaabe out there would be like, oh, we see you're back again. You know, we see you're here, you know. And they love me, and they don't want me to go, but they knew eventually I was going to go. So, knowing that I was going to go, they recorded me singing some of these water songs. An elder, Mary Renville. And when I left, something happened with her phone. It got broken or it got lost. Something like that happened. Well, what happens when that happens? All the content's gone. The video is gone. She didn't have a way to reference back to that video any longer. And she was very sad about it. And I thought, well, we're going about this clearly the wrong way. You know, if in a moment we're all moving and we're changing places, we're living our lives, you know, and that's going to have an impact on the kinds of songs and teachings that we can pass on from community to community. There has to be a better way to do this. So that's where Honor Water came from, was a way in which people could simultaneously look at the way the language is written in Roman orthography, listen, and carry on with the water teachings. Because it is in our teachings that as we speak, as we create resonations, that this actually does influence all that is around us, including water. This is a part of this game in very subtle teachings. In game text, which is like trying to distill these massive teachings down to what, like 150 characters. But that's the emphasis, right? On a molecular level. So this is why this game was opened up to all people. Because the elders and the women that I worked with understand and recognize and support that we are at such a state of crisis with what is happening with water, understanding that in our stories it says it's going to get worse, all right? It's going to get worse and then it'll get better, but it's going to get worse. So everyone needs to sing these songs. Everyone needs to know these languages. Everybody needs to know the language of the land, of the people who are from here. The game I'm working on right now, Métis, is a motion sensor game that takes you through the process of wild ricing. Do any of you know about what ricing is or have gone wild ricing? Like one. Yay! The representative ricing knowledge. So, people came to these waters because of stories that there would be food that grows upon the water. It's wild rice. And there are particular ways that you're supposed to gather the seeds. They're actually seeds, not rice, but seeds from these plants in a good way that doesn't destroy the plants. And so there is going to be like this, the Duluth Children's Museum is building a life-sized but made out of fabric wigwam, which would have been like our traditional dwelling place. It's circular, it'll be like a dome. And then youth will go inside of it and they will motion their way through different steps that go into ricing. So the first step is knocking the rice. And the second step is it's called parching, where you're basically semi-cooking the rice, you're like roasting the rice in a big kettle. And then you are dancing on the rice. It could also be called jigging. So you like dance on the rice. And that's when the kids it's probably gonna be like chaos at that point of the game. You're like, oh gosh. And then in the last step, you're winnowing the rice. So there's a birch bark basket that you take and you toss the rice into the air, and the wind will carry off the shells of it, and then you're left with the cookable rice. And then, of course, at the very, very end, you're giving thanks. So there's like a gratitude part where the northern lights come out, and you're able to, move your hands and your body around, and the northern lights move with you as you're going along. So that's the project I'm working on right now that'll be at the Children's Museum, and includes both the instructions in Anishinaabe and English, both languages. All right. This is the last one I'm going to tell you about, and then I'll open up to questions. Right now, I'm working on Thunderbird Strike. And Thunderbird Strike, well, I'm glad I've been able to get arts funding for it, let me tell you. That's, I think, the only place I'm going to be able to get support for this one. So in Thunderbird Strike, it's a runner, essentially. You're playing as a Thunderbird, flying through the air, and you're striking lightning down in mining company buildings and the big, giant mining trucks. And you get points for destroying all of that, while there are caribou, which you cannot harm. They're untouchable. They will scatter, but you're not ever going to be able to harm them. And you're moving into the second level where you use your swooping talons to grab up pipelines that are not yet placed into the ground. And you lift into the air and they dimensionally portal out. They're just gone. Like these pipelines, they're gone, okay? They're just gone. And then in the third level, you're flying around the perimeter of the Great Lakes, and you find out, not to spoil it or anything, but whatever, it's all good, that you've actually been a female Thunderbird this whole time, and you're lifting up your eggs to move them to places of safety, while a manifestation of what is known in stories as the black snake is facing off against you. So you're trying to protect your eggs. So I've been working on this for a year, and this is a sketch. This is like the first thing that came out. This is essentially the path of the story of the game. It could be like a level menu. At the top left is the Alberta tar sands, and at the bottom right are the Great Lakes. This is geographically accurate. This is a proposed pipeline system that has not yet been laid into the ground. And if you see here, this path, everywhere that's black, this is where they have proposed operations, creating the back of the snake. These fangs are actually triangles. These are lines that they want to put in, and they wrap. This line wraps around the legs, and there are two fangs that come out. I'm not kidding you guys. The stories are real. These stories have been told for generations. Our stories say that there will come a time that there will be a snake that will swallow us whole. Okay? This comes out of another spirit, Wendigo, which I can't talk a lot about right now because snow is not on the ground here, but there is snow in places where these stories are told, which essentially means greed. The taking ones. So it takes and takes and takes. It's a spirit that eats and eats and eats and eats, and it's never satisfied. Our understanding is that this is very real, and in fact, if you look at what's happening in North Dakota right now with Standing Rock movement, they're trying to lay pipelines down over sacred lands right now. There's like hundreds upon people. Is anyone aware of what's going on there? Okay, a good bit of you. If you don't, check it out. They're about to go into winter, trying to hold their position here. It's not just happening there. It's the fact that Enbridge 5 is at the bottom of the lakes, all of these issues, right? So there are understandings that this actually just needs to stop. Because the only way to properly kill a snake is to rip off its head. So in the game, you always win. There is no losing, there is no force against you. You build up morale the more you attack, and your attacks result in thunder that will just rip everything up. Because in our teachings, it goes that there will be fires, which have already happened in Alberta this summer. So this is where we're at. This is what our community is talking about right now. Those fires have just happened. The second phase are storms that come and flooding. And the third is that the earth will reshape herself, which is understood to be earthquakes. And the Thunderbirds are in part a part of this because the thunder happens through the ground as well, not just from the sky, that it's going to happen through the ground layer of the world. So that's what I'm working on right now, and I'm very excited to get that out because it'll merge the art with the design, and I'm working with an Indigenous programmer for that, which is the first time I ever had an opportunity to work with an Indigenous programmer because there had not been enough people, but we're reaching that point. Because I believe very strongly that as I've gone along in my work, I always feel like I'm kind of like fighting a system. I'm like working against something. I'm like, how much can I work this towards an Indigenous perspective? That we really need to be working from the code up. So eventually where this kind of work is leading are Indigenous game engines from the ground up or from the code up. So miigwech, thank you. It's an insight, and I'll just take questions now.
Is part of your mission to not only help the communities but also communicate out, your beliefs and things to the broader communities?
Definitely. So Thunderbird Strike is a situation like that. It's really game to game, and I never really know. It's like it's going to be about who I'm around and who I'm communicating with, who I'm working with. So anything from the gift of food, where the communities decided to keep it to themselves, to what Thunderbird Strike is it's like, can we just win? Can we just do that? Like, it's not, like, how about we just win all the time, right? And then embedded in that, so it's primarily for an Indigenous audience in that regard, but I think that the gameplay will be fun enough that it's interesting enough that it'll draw in other people, and then hopefully they'll get insights into the stories as well.
You said that on our Waters game also you uploaded songs on YouTube.
Yes.
Can you tell me the distinction between gameplay in the game and the song, and where it's available in the iPad? Is that the only thing?
Yeah, so it's only available on the iPad, and that's part of why I'm putting it up online, because the company that I was collaborating with on that, Pinois, they don't really have the money right now, and they've gone to VR. So they're like, I'm like, oh, they're gone. They're not really interested in revisiting and like doing anything on any other platforms at the moment, right? Because they're actually working on making a camera that will better film for VR. So I'm like, goodbye forever. So that's part of why I decided, okay, I'm not going to wait for this to be available on all devices. I'm going to get the core of what communities want right now accessible in any way possible. The difference is very minor in that game. It's that in the game, you can pause the singing and you can click on each phrase, and then you get the phrase inside of a sentence, and you get the breakdown of it, and you get to see it, and you can listen to it over and over again repeatedly. So it's like more hands-on with the language itself. And then the other piece of it is that you can record yourself singing, and you can upload it directly to social media. And that piece, a couple of people have done it, but I think for the most part, people are fine with singing on their own and not being heard. So that's been part of the thing about showing this game, is I'm like, I don't need like a singing booth to like let people go into on their own. because people are too hesitant. Like, they'll watch it and they'll listen, but in an exhibition space like this, I mean, there would just be no way. You have to have a different kind of separate experience. So yeah, I hope that answered. Yeah, cool.
So I've pitched game ideas to different audiences, but I'm wondering if you have any stories to share about when you're going to your elders or working with the communities and saying, hey, we could make a game. How does that go?
Yeah, when I first started, it was like one of two responses. I started off, what really helped keep me in game development was I had community members ask me to run youth workshops because they understood that this was taking their time. You know, they're obviously really engaged in this. How can we do it differently? So there was that response, and then there was like another response, which was just, you cannot put teachings into games that you have no idea who will access it and at what point. Especially because our stories are often not to be shared unless it is winter. So then, how do you distill stories into something that can be accessed at any point, right? And, you know, years ago we were talking about, well, could you put a limitation on it? Like, that's where the conversations would start. Can we put a limitation on it where they can only access this during the winter or something like that, right? And eventually it parsed out to, fuck it, we gotta tell these stories. Things have changed rapidly in the last several years in our ceremonies because at one point people were saying, do not share, because communities have been taken from, like point blank taken from, or things get misinterpreted, right? And they don't want those misinterpretations. But the point we're at now with particular kinds of stories, this is not the case for star knowledge, okay? Which is hard for me because that's connected to the name I was given. There's so much I want to share. There's so much I want to say. There's so much I want to be able to show you about how the stars are connected. You know, there are some things I can only say in limitation. Like, I can tell you that we're not just looking at the stars themselves, we're looking at the connections between them made by the plasma that runs between the stars. How about that for a virtual reality experience? No, thank you. Not at that point yet. Not at that point yet. I have hope that there will be more openness, trust, that there will be this building out. Right now, we're just telling the stories that are really important for all people. Oil needs to stop, you know, like this, it needs to stop. Like, there's no like, maybe, but what about, but there are people, it gives jobs. No, no. It's actually destroying the foundation of the land that we are on, and it's going to eventually lead to our complete demise. So, you know, I mean, but you can have fun with that. Like, I'm probably running youth workshops up north in Sault Ste. Marie this summer, and that's what the youth want to do. They want to tell, because the workshop is like STEAM, because apparently that's accepted now. I have elders that are so bitter about that, because they're like, I was talking STEAM way back when, and nobody would listen, and now they're coming to me wanting to put my name on grants. Like, this is the kind of stuff I hear from elders. Like, they get, and it's understandable. You know, somebody at some point tells them storytelling doesn't matter, and then all of a sudden it matters because it matters for a grant, and then everybody's like trying to put their name on things and pay them pennies. You know, that's not reciprocity. That's not community engagement. That's just continuing to take, you know. So this workshop that is STEAM, but is Indigenous-led, so this is great. The Native American Institute is putting this together. And it has to be about water, and it has to relate to science. Well, we can go to our stories and the post-apocalyptic stories, which are always quite fun. Because in one of our stories, there is an idea that there will be, there's a word in our language for space canoe, because we've always understood that there actually is interstellar travel. Yay! Pretty cool. Eventually that'll be a game, Space Canoe. forthcoming to you. So in some of our teachings, then there is this idea that there will be like a canoe, like some kind of flying canoe or like a space canoe, something, but it's not quite the same because it doesn't come from people from other places. It comes from here, and that this will go to a red planet, and that they are going to, instead of paying attention to the water here and taking care of the water here, they're going to send these people out to get new water from this red planet. But what they don't know is that there are, and they have a word for like microbes. There are microbes in the water that when they come back and these people distribute this water, every turns into zombies.
Oh my God.
and then the people who have maintained water and these songs will move into the caves, stay the fuck away from the zombies while they all eat each other, because these zombies will eat other zombies. They will eat anything. They will eat each other. And they're just gonna wait for everyone to eat each other, and that warriors will be not just warriors in a fighting sense, but in fact, warriors and water carriers will merge, because that is what they're going to be going out to do. They're going to be carrying water back and forth to communities. They're going to be digging into places for water. And that we will sustain our communities while everybody else eats each other. So that might be a fun game. I don't know. Depends on which side you're coming from. Might be a good idea to learn some songs and hook up with the land. Because the teachings also do say that it's open to all people. Because I'm Anishinaabe. And so that's intrinsically a part of our teachings. And it's not just about us, it's about anyone who will work on behalf of the land. So maybe some kind of story like that will be coming out of a youth workshop. Elders get very excited about that, because they're like, yes, we need a way to pass on these stories to our youth and to have them telling those stories. Yeah. That may have been my mic drop. I don't know. Zombies? That might be it. We good? Thank you.